Hello, all. It's time to continue the epic tale of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Now, if you remember, the Trojans, led by Hector, fierce warrior Hector, were taking the attack to the Greeks. The Greeks were pushed up against the seawall. The Trojans were coming to destroy their ship. Victory after 9 years of harsh fighting. Victory seemed to be at hand. Zeus interfered a little. And as the Trojans were getting ready to attack, I forget who, one of Hector's soldiers saw an eagle, and the eagle had a snake in its hands, and the snake turned and bit the eagle, and the eagle, died and dropped the snake. And the snake died. Everyone took that as a sign from Zeus that, hey, that's a bad omen. Let's stop. Hector's like, bah, basically thrown against the gods. So let's pick up chapter 13 or book 13 here, and see what happens, shall we? But something happened up in the heavens. Zeus, who had been watching the Trojan offensive, at last turned his gaze away from the battlefield. He was satisfied that in obeying his orders, none of the gods had interfered in the battles. There was no doubt then that Hector and his men would get to the ships. There was no need for him to remain any longer. The god's father therefore boarded his resplendent carriage and drove off to visit the land of the horse-breeding Thracians. He had barely gone when Poseidon hastened to the battlefield, waving his trident. He was determined to bring help to the Greeks whom he favored. He could not accept their destruction. He could not bear to watch them so, retreating and falling. Amongst the scampering Greek troops, he assumed the appearance of Calchas and accosted Telamonium Aias and Aias of Oilus, and shouted to both, "There is in you enough power to save the whole army! What is the matter with you? Why do you think in terms of defeat and not of victory? Do not stay here. To battle! Go back to battle!" And with these words... Sorry, I need to turn something off here, guys. And with these words, he tapped the two warriors with his magic staff, lending them ardor and heroic spirit. The Trojans, who pressed their advance further towards the ship, suddenly met a counterattack. Until then, the Trojan army had behaved like a boulder hurling down a mountain, leaping wildly from rock to rock, mowing down everything on its path. But now, once it had reached the plain, it was like it had lost its momentum and had slowly come to a halt. So the Trojans halted before the Greeks, who, influenced by the two Aiases, were displaying renewed resistance. In the bloody encounters that followed, many heroes fell on both sides, and over their bodies the struggle continued furiously. They fought in various places, under the ship's sterns. They fought with spears and swords, chariots clashed, the ground was cluttered with the dead and the moaning wounded, the earth was drenched with blood, littered with shattered spears, broken arrows, shields, helmets which had been torn off warriors' heads, lances that had not reached their target. Duels were fought between heroes. Entire divisions of roaring soldiers came to grips with each other, and in the chaos and heat of the combats, it was difficult to distinguish one's enemy from one's friend. It was a glorious day for Idomeneus, king of the Cretans, who fought alongside the Greeks. But it was also a great day for Deiphobus, Priam's son, and also for Aeneas, and for Paris, and for the Trojans. Supported by Poseidon, the Greeks were fighting bravely, and now that Zeus was looking elsewhere and was no longer keeping an eye on the battle, the Trojans suffered painful losses. In the battle, Menelaus was tackled by young Pisander. Their vibrating spears drew no result, so they gasped their swords and engaged in fierce exchange blows, and Pisander was killed. Everywhere the wavering Trojan lines were driven back. Harpalion, prince of the Phalagonians, allies of Troy, was struck dead by an arrow. He was immediately avenged by Paris, who shot Euchenor, king of Corinth, with his unerring bow. On the whole, the left wing of the Trojan army was retreating. Polydamas ran in search of Hector, who was fighting on the right wing. "Hector," he called out, "we must call our troops where we have fought in vain. There is no strategy in our attack." "You are right," replied Hector, leaping from his chariot. "Stay here while I go to the left wing and give them orders." Hector's presence and voice restored new life to the Trojans. They reassembled to face the enemy front line, who stopped in their tracks. Hector dashed incessantly up and down down the front ranks. Aias, upon seeing him, made his way through the soldiers and defied him. "Hector!" he roared. "Where do you think you are going? To our ships? You are mistaken. You will not get through. Only one path is open to you, and that is the path of flight." "No, Aias," replied Hector, "I shall not flee. Instead, this day shall be the Greeks' last, and yours too, if you stand in my way. Before nightfall, the dogs and the birds will feast over your body." The two of them attempted in vain to confront each other, but the swaying ranks pulled them apart. Hector again shouted, "Forward, Trojans! Stand by me! To the ships!" His cry was echoed by a deafening roar emitted by 1,000 men. Once more the Trojans' attack met with a brave resistance put up by the Greeks, who answered with their own cry of war. Whew! Pretty wild battle. A little back and forth everywhere. Book 14. However However slow, however difficult the Trojans' progress was towards the ship, Hector's cries reached the tent where old Nestor, sitting by the wounded Machaon, awaited news of the battle's latest developments. Unfortunately, he whispered, Hector's cries are all too clear. I shall not remain in this tent. I shall take up my post. The old man felt that his time had come. He armed himself from head to toe and set off to combat, but he was to die in battle, crowning his long life with glory. On his way, he met some of the Greek princes who had gathered on the seashore. They were all worn out or wounded. Ah, Nestor, Agamemnon said, Hector's threats have proved true. We are defeated, and our ships shall be destroyed. Yes, replied the old man. The wall in which we had rested all our hopes has fallen, and it will not be up to us, I so old and you so wounded, to reverse the fortunes of the battle. However, suggested Agamemnon, we can launch the ships to sea and so avoid them being destroyed by the Trojans. We could sail offshore, wait for nightfall, and... Odysseus interrupted him. Agamemnon, what cowardly words you speak! You who have the honor of leading the Greeks, you speak of taking flight? After 9 years of battle and sacrifices, you suggest putting our ships back to sea? Don't you understand that if they see a sailing ship, none of our warriors will want to get on it? They will think they have been betrayed. They will throw down their arms. It would be disastrous. I agree, Odysseus, replied Agamemnon. Speak then. What do you suggest we do? Diomedes intervened. Listen to me, he said forcefully. We are really wasting too much time. We are wounded, it is true, and we cannot fight. Nevertheless, we can stand among the fighters and urge them with our presence and voice. We can lead back to battle our scattered soldiers. Let us not linger, therefore. Let's go where there is fighting! Thereupon the princes returned to what could have been the last battle, had not Hera, protectress of the Greeks, kept a close watch over them. She did not want the triumph of Troy through the deaths of Agamemnon, Nestor, Odysseus, and Diomedes. Zeus could be back any moment now, she said, to take the battle in hand, and there would be no hope left. I must therefore distract his attention. I must act so that he doesn't see or think. The beautiful goddess then flew over the high peaks of Mount Ida, where Zeus had taken his seat again. Before she joined the father of all gods, she called on Sleep, brother of Death. Sleep, she said, friend and master of all, listen to me. I have a favor to ask of you. Grant me my wish, and you will receive a golden chair as a gift. Make Zeus, who I am about to visit, sink into a deep sleep. I cannot unless he asks me himself. I fear his anger. Sleep, if you think a golden throne is not sufficient, I promise you shall marry one of the young Graces, the sweet Pasiphae, with whom you are in love. At these words, Sleep smiled. If you give me Pasiphae, whom I love, then, O Hera, I shall make Zeus sleep for as long as you wish. And so it happened. Followed by the invisible Sleep, Hera pleasantly conversed with Zeus, cajoling and caressing him, while Sleep cast his spell. Slowly Zeus fell asleep. As soon as Sleep saw the father of the gods asleep, he fled to Poseidon. Now, he announced, you are free to help the Greeks, O Poseidon, king of the sea! Poseidon did not hesitate. Warriors of Greece, he shouted as he appeared to them, are we to leave victory to Hector? No, take courage. Let us unite our efforts and form an iron wall that the Trojans will not be able to overcome. Forward! Revived, the Greeks tightened their ranks and marched on slowly toward the Trojans, uttering loud shouts and raising a din of weapons. Neither the wind blowing through the leaves of the great oaks, not the roaring fires in the mountain ravines, nor the sea crashing on the reef were as loud as the clamor raised by the two opposing armies. Hector saw all the enemy princes draw nearer, even the wounded ones, but he didn't lose heart at the sight. He wielded his spear and aimed it at Aias. The blow would have killed Aias had it not hit the heavy leather belt which held his shield and sword. As Hector, still facing the enemy, withdrew among his men, Aias picked up one of the many boulders that had been used to prop the ships and hurled it at him. The boulder struck Hector on the head, and he collapsed unconscious to the ground. With a cry of triumph, the Greeks lunged forward, hoping to capture their hated enemy. But already the Trojan warriors were shielding Hector. They had all rushed to the rescue. Aeneas, Polydamas, Agenor, Glaucus, Sarpedon, and the Trojan princes. While a close link rank held firm against the Greeks' lunge, Hector was dragged back, carried into a chariot, and driven to the shore of the river Xanthus. There he was revived by cold water being poured over his head. He came to, opened his eyes, looked around him, and then suddenly vomited blood and lost consciousness again. Meanwhile, the Greeks were attacking with renewed zeal. This was the opportunity they had been waiting for, the moment which might decide the fate of the day. Before Hector recovered, they must hurry and strike the enemy a hard blow. For a while, even without Hector, the Trojans held on, but many perished, others fell back, the front line yielded, and soon the retreat turned to flight. Chased by the Greeks, the Trojans lost all the ground they had conquered at such a high price. They were driven further and further back until they were compelled to clamber over the other side of the wall. Well, that's the end of book 14. Um, those meddling gods again, guys. I mean, they're crazy. I'm trying to see how many more pages we have left because I really want to get to the Odyssey because that's where the myths come in hardcore. How many books are there? So we have about 30 pages left in the Iliad. Hopefully we can finish it, and then maybe next week start the Odyssey, because the Odyssey is where like the myths really come in, all the crazy mythical creatures and cool stories about Odysseus and his travels home. Anyway, guys, all right, check out what you need to do for this activity.